Welcome everybody to today's Cloud EDU webinar. I'm going to take this off because I am alone and socially distanced in my office. Welcome to everybody. Today's topic is Google Workspace Education Edition for the littlest learners. And by littlest learners, we are referring to grade 1, 2, and 3. That's my focus today, but there's certainly learnings that can be applied in kindergarten or grade R, as we say in South Africa, and grade 4 and grade 5, and even grade 6, and even high school if you really were able to adapt. I want to leave this up here, and I know Temba is going to be dropping this link in the chat for me, but I'd love to get some feedback as we get started today. So if you can head on over to that Jamboard and answer the question, I would be grateful. We'll take a look at your answers in just a moment. So just a quick introduction. My name is Kevin Sherman. I'm the Director of Professional Development for Cloud EDU, Google's preeminent education partner in South Africa. I've also got a lot of badges, as you can see, and Cloud EDU is a Google for Education partner, as I mentioned, but we love to do professional development with teachers and with schools. So if you are interested in having a workshop like today's webinar for your staff, please do get in touch with us. We'd love to do this. And in fact, today's session is a shortened version of a 2-hour workshop that I do called Google Workspace for the Littlest Learners. So if you want the full version for your staff, again, you can get in touch with us. And when we do this with schools and train a whole staff, you get a folder full of stuff. So after I do the session, I share a folder of templates and resources for educators so they have all of the things that I show them and that I will show you today, they get in that folder. I also want to give everyone a quick heads up. In 2 weeks, my colleague Temba Skosana is going to be taking the webinar chair from me and will be presenting a webinar on why Chromebooks. So Chromebooks have taken over the education market in the United States, Australia, the UK, Sweden, the Netherlands, Belgium, and they're the device of choice now for schools. But they're still relatively new to South Africa, although we have a lot of South African schools using Chromebooks. But it's still a relatively new device. So we're going to unpack the rationale for why to use a Chromebook, what it's good for in the classroom, what makes it a different kind of device for use in schools, and why a Chromebook is really, truly an education device. The agenda for today is we're going to take a look at Google Forms, Google Docs, Google Slides. I'm even going to sneak in Google Drawings, and we're going to give you a couple of examples of Jamboard. So if you haven't used Jamboard before, we've got a webinar, and I think the first webinar I did this year was on Jamboard. And if you have found Cloud EDU's YouTube channel, you can locate that Jamboard session there. So why should we use technology in the foundation phase or grades 1, 2, and 3? I'm just going to see if we've got any answers over. Look at that. You guys are a fantastic audience today. To get our learners tech confident so they can participate in online activities, using tech does not have an age limit. Our littlies need to show what they know in ways more than just a workbook or worksheet. Technology can be used as a tool to broaden horizons and allow for exciting pre-learning experiences. Oh, you guys have great ideas. And to have fun with the children and bring joy to our tech lessons to learn our alphabet with the keyboard. Absolutely true. And I'll be taking a look at some of the ways we can use the technology to teach the little ones. And really this started to become a need as we took schools Google a few years ago, and we took them through our basics training. And Cloud EDU is quite well known for our change management strategy and our all staff training. And what we found was teachers coming back and saying, well, that's all well and good, Kevin, but I have no clue where to get started. And especially grade 1, 2, and 3 teachers were telling us this. And because they had kids who had devices, they felt a little bit at a disadvantage. So I'm never one to say that you need to get rid of pencil and paper, especially for little ones. They need those fine motor skills. But what I do think is the Google tools give us an opportunity to reinforce the other skills that we want to teach around language, math, and to even use Google tools for graphic organizers. We're not going to have enough time today to get into the graphic organizers. I've removed that from today's half-hour webinar, but I'm going to give you lots of great examples from literacy, languages, and math, and how to integrate digital skills to make thinking visible and scaffold the learning. So how do we decide when to use technology? I'm going to show you an example that comes from my colleague, Eric Kurtz. Now, Eric is an American EdTech coach, and he came up with this activity for winter. Now, obviously, there are very few places in South Africa where we could do this, but essentially what the skill here is to copy and paste. So I'm going to take a couple of arms from my collection of arms, and this is a Google slide deck. You can see we've got lots of options here on the left side, and I can copy and paste those arms, and I can come over here, and I guess, well, let's get some feet on this snowman. We'll make him a snow woman and give him some pumps. Shows you what I know about women's shoes. I hope those are pumps. And so we copy and we paste that. Now, have I taught digital skills? Yeah, you could say so. I have taught students how to navigate around the slide deck. So they have to know how to click on these little guide slides on the left side. And I've taught them how to copy and paste to add things to their snowman. And there is a literacy component here. There's a section here to write about your snowman. But as you can see, this isn't very demanding, and it's really teaching skills in isolation. In other words, we're not really combining and synthesizing the technology skills with the digital skills. So look at this as a different kind of example. This particular challenge, like we call this the rainbow challenge. So we've been learning about rainbows this week. Can you make a rainbow by collecting items from around your home? So this was an assignment that was given last year during lockdown by some teachers that I know. Try to get something red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple in your rainbow, collect the items and put them into a rainbow pattern. So we're teaching patterning, we're teaching about rainbows, and here's the digital skill. Take a photo of them, find the slide. So now the students are going to take the photo and they're going to add that to a Google slide deck. So we're doing a little bit of copy and pasting or uploading a photo, and that might be something that you have students do with a parent guiding them if they aren't sure how to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you break down these skills in a few minutes. And then paste that picture there. So we're doing a little more synthesis around the subject that's being taught than in the previous example. And that's the goal. The goal here is to think about how can we integrate digital skills into the regular classroom teaching that we're doing. So here's my grade R to grade 1 example. We're going to teach a digital skill, which is use the shift key to make a capital letter. And we're just going to practice typing our name. So this is pretty much a practice typing exercise. But what you can see here is we have a guiding Google Doc, and we have made this a little bit less intimidating for students. So how have we done that? Well, we've used a table, and that table is inserted here into the Google Doc. We've got an image of a keyboard in the Google Doc, and then we've got these shift keys that have been highlighted. So this is just an image that we got off the internet, and we are adding that shift key here at the top to emphasize what's happening, right? What is the skill? Where am I looking at the keyboard? That just highlights it a little bit for students, and then we get this other reminder down here. And so they're just practicing a single skill. And with the little ones, you want to try to think about how can I break down, especially grade 1 and 2, how do I break down the technology into small little steps so they're acquiring one skill at a time. And you might start to think about how do we do this in grade 1 in particular, a skill a week, so that it's really something that students can digest and build upon. We're used to doing that when we teach students to write. We're used to doing that when we teach them the alphabet and phonics, but it's something that we need to bring to our technology integration. Now, I'm going to take a little digression just to show you that you can start using technology with students right from the first day. So you don't necessarily even have to have students with technology skills to begin this process. This is a Google form that's just asking for information about the students on the very first day of school. And the idea here is you want to capture some data, and you can demonstrate data handling to students early on, right? So you can show students the value of data, the value of this collective information we're going to get from the entire class. How old are you? What is your favorite color? You could pull that into your Google form. You can open that form up in a spreadsheet, expose children to the concept of a spreadsheet. You don't have to get into the weeds, just show them a spreadsheet, and then you might create some graphs either in the spreadsheet or show them the graphs that are sitting in the responses in Google Forms. You could also make this a little more engaging by asking things like, what's your favorite ice cream? And of course, you can start to build on this once they have the skill of completing a form, right? Think about that. That's a skill in and of itself. You can then begin to give students quizzes and build their understanding using other kinds of information in a Google form, like teaching time. And you can build on that even further by giving them different clock faces. So that using that ability in Google Forms to add different images for options is a nice feature to use. So what time is lunch? They've got two choices. They've got to also interpret the data from very different clock faces, which would be a challenge. I love this example. This is going to be a language example for how do we combine a Google form with a YouTube video. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to hear this sound, but I'm only going to play about probably less than 30 seconds of this video. Let's open that up.
Yoko by Rosemary Wells. What would you like for lunch today, my little cherry blossom? Asked Yoko's mother. All my favorite things, please, answered Yoko. Yoko's mother spread steamed rice on a bamboo mat. She rolled up a secret treasure inside each piece. Then she packed it all in a willow-covered cooler.
So just in case you didn't get that, she's making sushi. And of course, there's a question here. What kind of food did Yoko have in her lunch? And so we can ask some very basic questions. We can illustrate these. But what's cool about this is anybody can do this. All I need is that tool right here, this cell phone, and I can record a video. I can record myself reading a short story, and I can avoid copyright issues by keeping that private. I can put that into a YouTube channel. I can mark it as private, and then just share that with my students. So it's not out in the world. That's fair use, and that allows me to read a story, have that reading. If I'm in a school with many teachers, if we all did one recording every week or 2 weeks, we'd have a very big library of stories that we have read out loud to our children that we could tap into at any time. You can also leave those sitting in your Google Drive instead of uploading them into YouTube. But you can see there's some other questions here. We've got that second question on the right. How did Yoko feel when the kids made fun of her food? And I happen to think that for foundation phase, teaching students to understand emoticons is a digital literacy. So we often take for granted that we're teaching literacy, but whether we like it or not, and I'm kind of a traditional teacher and I'm not really thrilled with the emoticon world, but it is our children's reality. So I think it's important that we try to appeal to them. When you're giving questions and you're embedding questions in a form as part of a video assessment perhaps, or just to check that they watch the video, try to keep it short. So give them a short video, ask only 3 to 4 questions. I've got a colleague that has a recommendation in terms of length of video, and the recommendation is 1.5 minutes for every grade level. So if I've got a first grade learner, then it's a 1.5 minutes. A second grade learner, I can maybe do a 3-minute video. A third grade learner, I can stretch it to 4.5 minutes. But that's a nice guideline. It's not a strict rule, but it's a great guideline for kind of timing the right length of video for learners' attention span, and also to kind of keep the video content that they're receiving a little more compressed. We don't necessarily want to overwhelm students with too much media. So we can do some other things in a Google form. We can have students make predictions about text. So if you've read Stella Luna in class, or you're going to begin to read Stella Luna, you might take in a picture. Again, you can use your cell phone to take a photograph from that book, drop it into a Google form as an image, and then ask your questions. You can also crowdsource synonyms. So we're going to make a winter word cloud, and we can enter 10 words that help you think about the season of winter, and then we can turn that into a word cloud. And there are lots of word cloud tools available on the web. You don't need to be a high-tech person to do that. I know I've got one that I use fairly often. I can find if you need me to. Let me just jump over here. Is it here? Yeah, so I use this one called Wordcloud Generator. It's a little more technical, but what I like about this Wordcloud Generator is you can do there's a wizard that'll take you through the whole process the first time. That's the wizard right there. And if you're that first time user, you might want to use that wizard tool. But you get to have a lot of control over exactly what your word cloud looks like. So they give you some templates. If you want to have various shapes, you've got different options for shapes. For letters, if you want to do a word cloud as letters, how colorful they are, and apparently you can also upload your own shapes. I've never done that, so I wouldn't be able to tell you how that works. But this is a pretty cool word cloud generator, and it's simply wordclouds, plural.com, and that is free, as is most of the things that we like to show you. So let's talk about how to integrate language and digital skills a little further. Specifically, I like starting out with language because I was an English teacher, so that's my bias. I do have some math examples coming up, and I promise to get to those before we finish up today. So here's another simple one. It kind of builds on that name activity that we did a little earlier. But again, we're using a table, and we're having students practice just how to use that point and click cursor function. So they're going to backspace to erase every R. And in the case on the right, they're going to delete all the capital A's and the lowercase a's. Now, I often have teachers who push back on some of these, and they say, well, we do this at our school this way. We don't introduce multiple fonts, and we don't do this, and we don't do that. And it's fine. You can adapt this to however you teach language and cursor practice and letters at your school. But the idea is that you've got some variety, especially on the right side here. You've got a lot of variety that allows students to learn different font styles, which is another important literacy skill. So you might not do this right away in grade 1, but you might up the ante further along in grade 1 and use more complex fonts to have students do more complex letter recognition. Again, these are taking advantage of a Google Doc and the ability to use the tables in Google Docs. And I can do a very quick demonstration. I think I'll open this one up. Nope, sorry. Some of these are linked and some of them aren't. This one is linked. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like. I will do this quickly because I know we have some techie people who already know how to do this, but here's our table. So I'm going to just highlight it. The way we do that is we insert a table, and we can actually decide how big we want that table to be, right? When we create it, you can always edit the table once you've created it. But the other trick here is this background page color. So what I've done is I've set the page color here, and that's hiding under page setup. And once I get to page setup, you'll find there's page color. So we've got a table that's just white text, right? White background, but we've shaded the page color so it's different, and that allows us to highlight the table so there isn't a lot of distraction for students. And then, of course, that backspace is just an image right there, all right? So that's the secret sauce in case you weren't sure how to do that in a Word doc, in a Google Doc. We've got word families, right? So we can teach some phonics. We've got dog, hog, log, frog, and jog. And of course, the students are going to put the og sounds in here. Here, we've got a little more sophisticated version on the right side, the at family. We've given them images, and they're supposed to fill in the entire word. So we have bat, sat, hat, and that last one down there is a rat. Now, how did we get those images? How do we know those images are copyright free? Well, once again, we're going to take advantage of the Google tool set. And in this case, I'm going to use the Explore tool, which is hiding at the very bottom right, or it's under the Tools menu here. And I can do a very quick Explore tool search for rat. And I'm going to go look for images. And look, look, that very first image here in the top right, that's the same one that's in that Google Doc. Now, all of the images that are returned in the Explorer tool are copyright free. So Google has already applied the filter, so you can rest assured that the images you're using are copyright free. That gives you and students peace of mind. So it's a really nice skill in time to teach little learners to use only the Explorer tool when they're doing an image search. And now I've got a couple Jamboard examples. I promised you I'd slip some in. So this is a version of the previous activity where we're using word family fun. Only in this example that we're going to have students move the letters in front of the words to make different combinations with word families with certain phonic sounds. And here's my littlest learners tip. Look for some digital citizenship opportunities. Now, I like to distinguish digital citizenship from digital literacy or digital skills. Citizenship is more around, am I building a good, ethical user of technology? Am I creating a future good citizen in this techno world, in this virtual world? And when that example that I just gave you of the Explore tool is one of those digital citizenship opportunities, is to teach students early on to use the image search using the Explore tool in Docs. One last phonics spelling example. This one's a little more sophisticated, grade 2, grade 3. We've got phonics here, we've got spelling, and we've got word recognition going on. Now, what's the technical skill? The technical skill here is, can students change the coloring of these circles? So this would be done in a Google slide. And in a Google slide, we can take a shape and we're able to change the color of the shape, the inside of that color of the shape. So we go to with the first example, shirt, S-H-I-R-T. So the students has to know how to spell it. In the second case, it would be I-R-D for bird. They're going to type the word, and then they're also going to practice the digital skill of changing the color of those circles. Spelling and sentence practice, another set of skills is, and this again would be more sophisticated. So you might start to teach this in grade 2, grade 3. We've got, please write 5 sentences using your spelling words. Make sure you use the shift key to start the sentence. So we're reminding students about how to start a sentence with a capital letter. We're teaching them to use that shift key and also use the correct punctuation at the end of the sentence. That's more around grammar. But then there's a bonus to underline or highlight the spelling words in their sentences. So that's some further digital skills around using fonts and manipulating text. We've also got some examples of spelling practice over here on the right side, or another example of Google Doc where they're filling in some blanks. But again, we're using a table. In this case, on the left example, we're using tables and we're shading those tables in. Finally, I think I'm getting close to the end of the literacy examples, and then I'll jump to some quick math examples. We might run slightly long today, but we've got a synonym example here using tables. Once again, you could crowdsource this with your entire class or with small groups. In this case, what I do is use Google Classroom. I would assign this Google Doc, which again is a table, and I would assign it to groups of students within my classroom for them to collaboratively add synonyms as they learn new words for good, bad, small, big, look, run, walk, and jump. We've got one more. I couldn't resist. Compound words is another cool way you can use the Google tools. In the cases on the right, we are using some examples with Google Slides where we're combining images, campfire to make campfire, cupcake to make cupcake. But this is something you could cut your students loose and have them create their own. So this would be a really nice way to encourage students to think about and build their vocabulary around compound words. And you might have a grade 3 class create a booklet of compound words, and then you could give that booklet to another grade 2 class and do some cross-curricular, cross-grade level teaching and learning. One of the challenges that young students have when writing is the idea that they have to write A lot, right? You open up a doc and it's a big white space, and that big white space can be very intimidating for young students. So let's try to shrink that space down. In this case, we've used that trick I showed you earlier of coloring the background of the page. We've added the image of Nelson Mandela. We've given students a prompt, but we've shrunk the amount of space that the students can write in by using a table. So that's a table, and I can preset the font to be a very large font size. So the only space might be enough space there if I use a 14 or 16 point font. There might just be enough space for 2 or 3 sentences for students. Now, it is a table, so if students want to write more, they're not constrained. That table will grow as they type. So this is just a one cell table. So it will extend if it needs to extend, but it starts out being less intimidating because that white space is much smaller. Okay, I'm going to do a quick leap through some slides. I apologize, but I'm going to dive ahead past some fun things that I like to do, but we don't have time. You can see if you look really fast, there's a lot we could do, but let's take a look at some maths and digital skills examples now. We've got about 5 minutes left, but I might go maybe 10 minutes longer. Animal patterning. So again, this is starting with the early grades. We need to teach kids patterning, and we can do that using Google Slides. This is an example from Google Slides. It could be done as a Google drawing as well. But I've got some lions and some dolphins and some flamingos, and the digital skill that I'm teaching is click and drag. So there are two things probably happening here. There are two skills, click and drag, which I kind of put together in the same skill set. And then there's copy and paste, which I also lumped together in another skill set. Now, why did I say copy and paste? They have to complete the pattern. So they're going to have to add more lions and dolphins and flamingos. Now, if you were teaching this to in the first couple weeks of school and you want to limit it to one skill, you could copy and paste a lot of lions, dolphins, and flamingos and sort of store them up in the top right for students. So they don't have to do the copy paste. They just have to do click and drag. If you want to try to combine two skills, you could do one first and then teach them how to copy paste. But you get the idea that they're completing the patterns and practicing two digital skill sets. We, as you guys know, you can draw lots of kinds of shapes in Google Slides and Google Drawings. So these are some basics that we can do, but we can build on these skills to do more advanced patterning and also teach some other kinds of skills like lines of symmetry. So here's an example of a horizontal line of symmetry. We give learners the shapes on the left side, so they have to know how to click and drag those shapes. We could give them a template that has the line of symmetry initially, or we can teach them how to draw that line. So you can decide if you want to give them the line or you want to teach that digital skill. And of course, they're going to copy and paste all of the shapes they need to create this. Now, there are a couple of ways you could do this. I'm a more, as you can tell, I'm not from South Africa originally, so I come to things from a little more American style. Also, I was a child of the 60s and early 70s, so I would tend to give students a lot of leeway. I wouldn't necessarily say, copy my fish. I would say, here's my fish, you make your own fish. The skill we want to make sure they demonstrate is lines of symmetry. So it doesn't really matter what their fish looks like. What matters is that they have demonstrated that they know how to make the fish symmetrical. But if you want to give them this fish as a model that they can copy the first time they do it, and then give them time to make their own fish, that would probably be the best way to build the skills and scaffold the learning. We can do tessellations with Google Slides and drawings. We can also do things like perimeter of a garden. I love this one. The font that I chose doesn't show that it says perimeter of a garden, but it does. And what students have to do is they have to count the units once they've created their garden design. So they're given some freedom to use whatever shapes they want to design their garden. And then they have to figure out what the perimeter of their garden is. So this is a really nice way to actually teach a few skills to students. And then we can also get into parts of a whole as well. So we could use this. And if you do this as a Jamboard, you could also write these over. That's what this is meant to illustrate, that we've got a Jamboard here, and I can actually sketch on the Jamboard and write 1/2 plus 1/2 and 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, et cetera, et cetera. The critical thing to do when you're working with little ones is to model, model, model. If you were doing it virtually, if we went back to lockdown and you're teaching virtually, your lesson could actually be teaching them how you're doing the activity. So that can actually fill some time if you're going back to virtual teaching. But even if you're face to face, it does matter for teachers. They do need a data projector in this scenario where they're going to show students something on a big board in order to model it. And you need to always keep thinking, how many skills does it take to accomplish this task? Am I breaking this down into sub parts? Am I teaching copy paste? Am I teaching click and drag? Am I teaching copy paste, click and drag? There are a lot of hidden goodness, but there are a lot of skills involved in using slides and drawings and even Google Docs if you're having students manipulate fonts. So if you want to think about all of the skills that you might learn when you're using a Google slide deck, and when you're asking students to do their own thing, right? Adding text, for example, to a shape, that's a skill. That's a single skill. And with little learners, you might just teach that one skill in a day with, again, modeling it first so that they understand how to do it and then having them practice it right away. This is a nice Jamboard math example. Place the number cards in the correct squares. This is a really nice, easy one because you guys who came earlier in the session and you used that Jamboard, you used a sticky note, and that's all these are. These are little sticky notes with numbers on them, but you could also make these images that they could click and drag around. We've got, this is a Google Doc where they're going to be, oh no, this is not a Google Doc, sorry. This is a Google slide. It could be a doc or a slide because you can shade a table in Google Docs. You can also shade a table in Google Slides or Google Drawings. So you really could pick whichever tool you like. But the idea is there's a group of pumpkins and the students have to count the pumpkins and they have to graph. So they're going to change the color of the cells in a table. So the skill is, how do I change the color of these cells? That's the digital skill. The math skill is counting and graphing. So we've got several skills being synthesized at once. This one, again, nice for the very littlest learners. The skill here is to click on that ring and drag it over 36 or 46. In this case, we've got 10 counting blocks of tens and then 6 ones, so it's 36. We can get more complicated with these counting blocks by having kids drag the tens and ones into boxes. So that's a little more sophisticated. Here we're only dragging a circle. Now I have to manipulate more objects and I have to move them into different locations. So again, you might do this in the same grade, but you would select this activity because it's simpler from a technological skill set. And then you would do this activity a little bit later. And then we can get really sophisticated. And there's a lot going on here. This happens to be a Google slide that I share in our Google Workspace for the Littlest Learners module. And I give, like I said, we're going to give these away if a school takes that workshop. But in this case, it could be a slide or it could be a drawing. It doesn't really matter. We've got a lot happening here, though. We've got place value. So we're typing 247 for 247. I might give the students this number, or I might let the students select whatever number they want. They're typing it out in expanded form. They're using the number word, and then they're taking these base 10 blocks and 1 blocks, and they're dragging them off the margins. Remember, you can store images off the edge of the page or off the edge of the canvas, which is what we call that thing in slides and drawings. We can have these sitting on the side and then kids can drag them over and place them here so they're using the base 10 blocks. So we have a lot of things happening with place value here on one simple slide or drawing. We can also count money and use that to make some sense. And some of these images are easy to find on the web, but I had to take pictures of some money and I had to actually make my own. And so that was the way we've got this again. So if you do that workshop with us, you get all the South African coins you might need. And this is a version of the same kind of activity, but it's using Google Jamboard. So again, we can pull those images in. It is a bit of a tedious process because I've already made this Jamboard and I had to take those images and bring them in one at a time to get that Jamboard. But once I've got the images, it's easy to duplicate each of the Jamboard frames. So I'll show you very quickly over here in our Jamboard. I see you guys have added to it some more since we were last here, but I can add a frame easily and I can duplicate anything that I've got. So I've got this, I used to think. I'll go to the last slide here and I'll paste that there. So once you've got your Jamboard, you can copy and paste individual pieces into the frames, and that saves you a bit of time. But to add an image to a Jamboard is a bit of a tedious process. So I can drag files from Drive. I can insert them from Drive here, but it does take some time to get those images in. And I have tons of images here which aren't relevant to our coin practice. But you can see that it took me, I had to do 15 or 16 separate inserting from Drive to get all these images in. Okay, let's see where we're at. Now we're coming towards the end of our presentation now. So I just want to end with this Google form because I like this use of the Google Forms combination of an image and multiple choice checkbox. So this is a checkbox grid style, one of the more complicated styles in Google Forms. But we've got an image here, and the image is simply numbers 1 through 100. So that would be above the questions. I just tried to show you by reconfiguring it on this slide. But that image would be sitting above the question. And then we've got look at the number above and match the statement on the left with the block on the right. So they've got to pick the right statement here, the number more than 67, and they've got to read these numbers up here. And because it's a checkbox grid, they can select more than one right answer. So this is actually requiring students to do quite a bit of thinking, right? And this by itself would be a really interesting skill to teach students, because what we're teaching them here is to read the image. So they've got to read that set of data, the table above in the image. They've got to interpret the question correctly, right? Look at the number and match the statement. And then they've got to read the options along the top column, the 66, 83, 65, 81, 68. And then they have to think, right? They've got to make sure that they're ticking all these. And ticking all these boxes is a digital skill, right? So being able to select the correct answer in a digital format is a little bit different than just ticking it with a pencil on a piece of paper. And we need to have students be comfortable in both worlds, because especially currently, right, 2021, they're not going to encounter less digital quizzing as they grow up. They're going to encounter more digital assessment. So we need to prepare them for that future. I need to give credit for these slides. I didn't design this particular deck. The template of this presentation is from Slides Carnival. They have wonderful free resources that you should check out on your own. I understand we don't have any questions today, so I will finish off with a shameless pitch again. Get in touch with us if you'd like to have this module in its 2-hour version for your staff. I would love to do it. It's one of my favorite modules to run for primary school teachers. And I want to thank you for joining us today. We really do appreciate your attendance. I wish you all a great holiday as we go into the holidays. And thanks a lot for coming and sitting in on today's webinar. And we'll see you in 2 weeks, I hope. Thanks a lot.